The story we're diving into today begins with a claim that Camilla's camp allegedly drafted a memo outlining plans to restructure the monarchy in a way that could bypass Prince William. The only reason it supposedly became public was because Princess Anne decided she would no longer stay silent. The timeline behind it is remarkable, and the contradictions have piled up to the point where the palace's silence feels less like careful strategy and more like growing panic. What makes this stand out even more is that Anne didn't call a press conference or issue an official palace statement with the royal crest. Instead, the information appeared through a deliberate leak, and people familiar with the way Anne operates quickly realized this wasn't an accident. Princess Anne has spent decades as the royal who rarely attracted controversy or chased public attention. She quietly carried out her duties and avoided unnecessary drama. That's exactly why this move carried so much weight. When Anne steps outside her usual approach, people pay attention. The message referred to what she described as a coordinated attempt to interfere with the line of succession. Although she never directly named Camilla, the wording was so specific that many believed the target was obvious. She claimed actions had taken place that went against the late Queen's expressed wishes and threatened the future of the monarchy. Invoking Queen Elizabeth's wishes is one of the strongest statements that can be made within royal circles. It wasn't presented as a disagreement over palace management. It positioned Anne as someone defending her mother's legacy while suggesting that forces inside the palace were working against it. If you want to follow every new development, subscribe to Crown Watch so you don't miss what's next. Since that initial leak, even more details have surfaced. According to sources close to Anne, she spent months wrestling with what she was discovering, slowly connecting pieces that she first believed were simply part of routine palace restructuring. Anne and William have always shared a close bond. She reportedly views him as the monarchy's last unshakable pillar, not simply Diana's son, but the kind of future monarch the crown desperately needs. So when Camilla's influence over Charles continued to grow, and Anne found herself gradually pushed away from the center of important decisions, she noticed things began changing in ways Anne couldn't ignore. Conversations that once included her suddenly took place behind closed doors, and invitations that had always reached her started going to others. She convinced herself it was simply part of evolving royal roles and modernization. The familiar palace language used whenever no one wanted to explain what was really happening. Then she came across a communication she was never supposed to see. Hidden within restricted documents were references to succession reform. Names had been redacted, and the wording was polished almost beyond recognition, but the implications seemed unmistakable. The proposals appeared aimed at weakening William's path to the throne under the banner of modernization, and that's what made the situation so unsettling. Nobody wrote, "We are removing Prince William from the line of succession." That would have been far too obvious. Instead, the documents referred to reconsidering succession dynamics, modernizing ceremonial roles, and reallocating representational duties. At first glance, it sounded like ordinary bureaucratic language, but read closely, and each recommendation seemed to point toward gradually reducing William's visibility, influence, and standing. The final paragraph of the memo allegedly recommended moving quickly before public expectations became fully centered around the Cambridge legacy. According to the claims, the language suggested urgency rather than routine planning. After seeing it, aides reportedly described Anne as unusually quiet for weeks, more troubled than angry. In private writings that surfaced later, she described the palace as rotting from within and referred to what she believed was a quiet conspiracy hidden behind protocol. Those words reflected someone who felt the institution she had defended for decades was facing a profound internal crisis. She began confiding in William, but with great care. Their conversations reportedly happened privately, sometimes through handwritten notes instead of anything easily traced. She didn't want to alarm him, but she believed he needed to know something within the institution was changing. William, true to his nature, urged caution, preferring to prevent the situation from escalating, but Anne believed she was seeing something deeper. In her view, Camilla wasn't simply involved in palace politics. She believed a different vision of the monarchy was gradually taking shape, one that left William increasingly on the sidelines. What makes Camilla's rise seem more complicated than an ordinary family disagreement, according to these accounts, is how methodical it appeared. This story didn't begin with a memo. Long before the world watched her crowned beside King Charles, there had been whispers about a carefully managed rise. After Diana's death, many observers noticed a lingering distance between William and Camilla. Publicly, they remained civil, but insiders have long described brief glances, restrained conversations, and carefully timed absences that hinted at something unresolved. According to people close to the palace, William remained fiercely protective of his mother's legacy, while Camilla never lost sight of how strongly Diana's memory continued to shape public perceptions of the monarchy. But instead of dwelling on that legacy, Camilla was reportedly focused on building her own influence. As Queen Elizabeth's health declined and Charles took on greater responsibilities, Camilla stepped further into the spotlight, not only as Queen Consort, but, according to these accounts, as a key strategist. Royal watchers noticed her influence steadily growing. She was no longer simply accompanying Charles at engagements. Observers believed she was becoming increasingly involved in shaping palace affairs. Familiar advisors gradually disappeared, replaced by figures seen as loyal to her rather than to long-standing tradition. Behind the scenes, a network of aides, press secretaries, and private counselors appeared to gather around her. And these changes weren't dramatic or highly publicized. They were presented as routine modernization and efforts to streamline royal operations. But longtime palace observers argued the monarchy rarely changes direction quickly without significant internal support. During periods when Charles faced illness, stress, or other personal challenges, those moments were viewed by some as opportunities for influence to shift. People who once had direct access to the king reportedly found communication becoming more limited, requests passed through additional layers, and public appearances appeared more carefully managed. Camilla was frequently by Charles's side during these periods, and some sources claimed that voices supporting her vision of a more streamlined, media-focused monarchy were the ones most likely to reach him. So when the memo eventually surfaced, supporters of this narrative argued it wasn't an isolated event, but the culmination of years of gradual maneuvering. The document itself was formal and bureaucratic in tone, yet those who reviewed it believed its intentions were unmistakable. When it reportedly reached William's inner circle, the reaction was immediate. One senior aide was said to have walked out of the room, while another reportedly became emotional. Words like betrayal were allegedly spoken openly. For William, according to these accounts, it appeared to confirm that the quiet exclusions and subtle shifts he had experienced were part of a larger pattern. Journalists later claimed to trace the leak through digital records to several senior advisors who had, in recent years, been viewed as especially close to Camilla's inner circle. These weren't junior staff members, but individuals holding influential positions within palace operations. Camilla's office declined to comment publicly, while speculation continued to grow. Outside the palace, public reactions spread quickly, with hashtags such as Justice for William and Camilla Coup gaining attention online. Polls reportedly suggested a noticeable shift in public sympathy, with renewed calls for greater transparency surrounding the line of succession and the Queen Consort's role behind palace walls. For a monarchy built on tradition and carefully managed public image, the controversy represented more than another difficult headline. It felt like a major rupture. But here's where it gets really strange. As the days went by, the palace remained completely silent. There was no statement, no denial, and no attempt to clarify the growing speculation. A royal communications team, usually known for responding quickly, appeared unusually quiet. Some believed the silence was a calculated strategy designed to let the controversy fade on its own, while others argued the institution had simply been caught off guard and didn't know how to respond. The question that continued to surface was far simpler than any discussion about strategy. If such a document really existed, who allowed it to be drafted? Who approved the wording? Who signed off on the proposals? And who ultimately stood to benefit? Throughout the controversy, King Charles's silence became one of the most closely watched aspects of the story. Publicly, he offered no response and, according to the claims, gave no reassurance to William either. To understand that reaction, supporters of this narrative point to Charles's long-standing reputation for caution. Throughout his life, critics have often described him as someone who delayed difficult decisions and preferred to avoid direct confrontation. As the controversy intensified, those perceptions resurfaced. While the public called for answers and tensions reportedly grew within the family, Charles was said to have become increasingly withdrawn. According to sources close to the king, it wasn't viewed simply as personal hesitation. They claimed Camilla exercised significant influence over his schedule, public messaging, and access to private meetings. Meetings were reportedly managed through close advisors, correspondence was carefully reviewed, and some insiders claimed Charles rarely handled important calls without Camilla nearby. Supporters of this theory argued the relationship had evolved beyond a traditional royal partnership, suggesting her influence reached deeply into palace decision-making. Then came reports of private conversations between Charles and constitutional reform advisors. These discussions were described as confidential rather than ceremonial. The reported focus was on modernizing the monarchy, simplifying succession, and reshaping royal representation. Critics claimed the language echoed phrases that had appeared in the leaked memo closely enough to raise further questions. Even after Anne reportedly presented her concerns directly to Charles, there was still no public response. Sources described that meeting between brother and sister as tense and deeply emotional. Anne was said to have demanded answers while defending what she believed was their mother's legacy. Charles, according to those same accounts, neither confirmed nor denied the allegations. The silence that followed only fueled further speculation. By then, the controversy had grown beyond a personal family dispute and, according to supporters of this narrative, raised broader questions about the monarchy itself. Palace staff reportedly became divided, with some viewed as supporting William and Anne while others remained loyal to Charles and Camilla. Rumours even emerged of a royal ultimatum, with growing pressure for the king to speak, make a decision, and restore order before the crown shattered under the weight of its own secrets. Despite everything unfolding around him, the king continued to say nothing, whether out of fear, uncertainty, or concern about what the truth might mean for both the monarchy and his own legacy. While Charles remained silent, Camilla's camp reportedly shifted into a full media response. Within hours of Anne's revelation, a wave of carefully crafted messaging began circulating. Journalists were invited to private, off-the-record conversations. Longtime royal correspondents suddenly found themselves with renewed access. Headlines appeared carrying remarkably similar themes, describing Camilla's quiet grace during palace turmoil and presenting her as a steady figure in uncertain times. To many observers, the coordination looked deliberate. The apparent objective was to reshape the narrative, redefine the key players, and above all, undermine Anne's credibility. Anonymous briefings reportedly found their way into the press, portraying Anne as emotionally overwhelmed, overly aligned with William, and frustrated with her place inside the royal hierarchy. Descriptions such as fragile, resentful, and isolated began appearing across coverage without directly naming her. Even Anne's long record of loyalty to the late Queen came under scrutiny, with suggestions that personal grievances had motivated her decision to speak. Television. Panels that had once praised her dedication suddenly featured commentators describing her actions as reckless, divisive, and poorly timed. Perhaps the most effective strategy was the way the leaked memo itself was reframed. Rather than being discussed as evidence of an internal power struggle, it was described as a misunderstood proposal for modernization. That explanation spread quickly and was repeated often enough that many people began accepting it as the dominant narrative. Behind palace walls, however, the atmosphere reportedly became increasingly tense. Staff members believed to be sympathetic toward Anne and William claimed they faced subtle pressure, including disrupted schedules, restricted travel, and uncertainty surrounding future contracts. Some whistleblowers even alleged their communications were being watched and that rumors were being spread about their families. Reports also claimed attempts had been made to gain access to Anne's private correspondence with William and to personal writings that could potentially be used against her. But Camilla may have underestimated one important factor: the palace was not as united behind her as many assumed. During the turmoil, another royal figure who had remained publicly neutral reportedly reached out to Anne. That development sent shockwaves through the inner circle. Long-hidden loyalties became increasingly visible, and private alliances started turning into public positions. For Camilla, who had reportedly spent years shaping her place within the institution, the strongest resistance was now coming from inside the palace itself. Then an aide stepped forward. That's the moment this story takes another dramatic turn, because until then, it had largely been Anne's account against the narrative promoted by Camilla's supporters. The silence became too much for one senior royal aide to carry, and after years of protecting the institution, she reportedly decided it was finally time to speak. Her identity remains undisclosed, but according to these claims, her testimony adds significant detail to Anne's account. She alleged the memo that stirred so much controversy was not created overnight. Instead, she claimed it resulted from months, possibly years, of drafting, revisions, and private discussions. Early versions were reportedly much more direct and did not rely on carefully coded language. According to her account, the original objective was to remove William from the line of succession under the banner of constitutional modernization. She alleged the wording became more cautious only because there were concerns the document might leak before enough internal support had been secured. One detail especially stood out. According to the aide, Charles was aware of the discussions. She recalled delivering briefing folders that, while heavily redacted, were never completely hidden from him. In her account, the king may not have written the proposals himself, but he allowed the discussions to continue. She further claimed that when later versions reached Charles, he neither approved them publicly nor objected to them. If that account were accurate, it would challenge the idea that he was entirely unaware of what was happening behind the scenes. The aide also described overhearing part of a private conversation involving Camilla. She couldn't recall every word, but one sentence reportedly stayed with her. "This will end the Diana chapter for good." She interpreted that remark as being about far more than public image, believing it reflected a desire to move beyond Diana's lasting influence on the monarchy. According to the aide, she attempted to leave quietly by requesting a reassignment for health reasons. Instead, she claimed she began feeling closely watched. She alleged unusual incidents involving phone calls, concerned friends, and returning home to find her front door unlocked with belongings subtly rearranged. Nothing appeared stolen, but she believed the experience was meant to send a message. Despite that, she continued keeping copies of records, notes, and dates, believing she might one day need them for her own protection. She has since reportedly shared documentation with Anne's team and stated that if Anne chose to make the matter public, she would be prepared to testify. Speaking about that decision, she reportedly described the emotional toll, recalling sleepless nights, overwhelming guilt, and the moment she saw William in a corridor but couldn't bring herself to meet his eyes. "I believed in the institution," she said, "until the institution became something else. Now attention turns to Anne." According to this narrative, the next step no longer belongs to Camilla or even Charles. After years of standing quietly beside her family and serving the crown, Anne is portrayed as stepping into the spotlight, not simply as a loyal royal, but as the monarchy's last defender. For Anne, this is no longer simply about protecting reputations. According to this narrative, she believes the future of the monarchy itself is now at stake. Backed by testimony, documents, and growing public attention, she is preparing for what supporters describe as her most significant step yet. She is reportedly calling for an independent royal tribunal to examine claims surrounding the line of succession. If such a move were ever to happen, it would represent one of the most extraordinary moments in modern royal history. Reports also suggest quiet support is emerging from figures across the Commonwealth and former royal advisors concerned about the institution's future. William is said to support Anne's efforts, although he reportedly continues urging caution in hopes of preventing deeper damage to the monarchy. Anne, however, believes there can be no lasting future without accountability. Meanwhile, reports claim Camilla's once confident inner circle is beginning to show signs of strain. Public appearances have reportedly been reduced, and stories of staff departures continue to circulate. According to these accounts, increasing public scrutiny has made it harder to control the narrative, King Charles remains at the center of growing speculation. Some reports claim trusted confidants have privately encouraged him to consider stepping aside for the good of the monarchy, believing William could help restore public confidence. Those claims remain unconfirmed but continue fueling public debate. Outside the palace, calls for greater transparency continue to grow, with many people debating the future of the royal family and the crown. Anne has never been portrayed as someone seeking the throne. According to supporters of this account, what she wants is clarity and accountability. Whether these claims ultimately prove true or not, they have sparked worldwide debate about the monarchy's future. As the battle lines continue to form, one question still hangs over everything. What comes next for the crown? If you enjoyed this video, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think these reports raise important questions, or do you see the situation differently? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Dynasty of Windsor, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next update.